Week 8 of college football has come and gone, and it was another exciting week of college football. Four top 10 teams went down, and there were a number of other upsets that occurred as well. We're going to take a look at some of the top games and talk about what exactly happened in week 8. We'll start with Friday night. Friday night kind of got the chaos going, and one of those top 10 losses was Louisville upsetting Miami. Miami did not look good. Carson Beck had a horrendous game, 4 interceptions for him, and the Cardinals improved to 5-1. Another upset that happened that night that didn't get as much recognition is Minnesota absolutely took it to Nebraska. Nebraska's offense couldn't get anything going. Darius Taylor was really good for Minnesota, 148 yards and 1 touchdown. Two highly under the radar games, if you stayed up late for these, San Jose State and Utah State. Utah State comes away with a 30-25 win. Bryson Barnes and Walker Egat were kind of trading blows back and forth. Barnes finishes 22 of 31 for 326 yards and 1 touchdown. Cal gets the win over North Carolina. The North Carolina saga, the drama continues. Cal wins 21-18. And then I didn't get eyes on the morning slate that much, but I do want to talk about Vanderbilt and LSU. Vanderbilt wins 31-24, and this was a fun game for those who got to watch the entire thing. From the little bit that I did get to watch, Diego Pavia and this offense continue doing exactly what they're doing. They are a tough team, and honestly, Vanderbilt was pretty aggressive in this game. There were some mistakes that they made that maybe made this game a little bit closer, but this was another impressive win. And I think it's time that we're going to have that conversation about if Vanderbilt is going to be considered an SEC contender. For LSU, obviously, you knew that another loss was coming at some point, and this was definitely one that it could have been. We knew Vanderbilt was a very good team, and the fact that LSU was 10th was a little bit strange to me, but now we get to see exactly why. Then you had another game that was another close one and kind of a back and forth in terms of which team was going to make a mistake first. It was the biggest question. Georgia Tech Duke. That was an absolute battle. Georgia Tech wins 27-18. They keep their undefeated season alive. That's another team that we're not really talking about. With Miami losing, there is a race to who's the top team in the ACC, and Georgia Tech is definitely in that conversation. Another big game in the morning slate was Washington going into Michigan, losing 24-7. The Wolverines looked really solid. There were times where Washington had its moments, and Michigan pretty much took care of business from there. Bryce Underwood, 21-27 for 230 yards and 2 touchdowns to help the Wolverines improve to 5-2. UCF takes care of business on the road against West Virginia, 45-13. Taven Jackson, 23 of 34 for 277 yards and 2 touchdowns. Arizona and Houston traded runs, and it was a fun game to watch. It was a game that was back and forth, and it was just like I said, it felt like at one point Arizona looked like they had control, then Houston took control, and it was just a very entertaining game. Houston wins 31-28. They improved to 6-1 on the season. TCU and Baylor, it was a long game because of weather delays, but in the end, TCU comes out with a 42-36 win, improves to 5-2. Baylor suddenly finds themselves at 4-3. That is something to keep an eye on for the remainder of the season. 7 games in with 5 games left. How are they going to finish this year? Tulane comes away with a survival win, if you will. They find a way to win against Army 24-17. Jake Retzlaff, 22-29 for 261 yards and 2 touchdowns. Oklahoma wins on the road, gets a bounce back win after losing to Texas last week, 26-7, improved to 6-1. South Carolina 3-4, very disappointing if you're Shane Beamer and this South Carolina team. Not exactly what you wanted when you came into this season. Then we get into the afternoon slate. Ole Miss at Georgia. This was an incredible game, and the afternoon slate overall was really good. And I think we learned quite a bit from both of these teams. We learned that any questions about Ole Miss as a legitimate undefeated team is probably out the door at this point. We knew this was a team that could potentially be very good, and they looked really good for 3 quarters. I think that this was a team that was definitely in that conversation, well in control of the game at times through 3 quarters, and Lane Kiffin was doing a great job of dialing up plays, of ensuring that his team was on the right track and finding ways to continue trading blows with a Georgia team that was not going away. And then the fourth quarter came, and it was pretty much Georgia. So that's definitely something that was very interesting. Now, when it comes to the the first half was wildly entertaining. I think that this was a defense is optional kind of game, and there were multiple games like this. Ole Miss and Georgia was definitely one of them. If you're Ole Miss, when you look at what happened, Trinidad Chambliss stepped up and delivered in a big moment. That's one thing that you do take away from this game as a positive, is that the moment was not too big for him. It was a big road test. It's still, I think people just kind of take for granted that he has made this transition from Division II to the FBS. Now he definitely deserves to be there, but I think at the same time, there could have been some concerns about him having some moments where he's struggled. So far, I think he has taken everything in stride, and he has really fit in well to Lane Kiffin's system. And the first three quarters, we saw that. We saw him staying really poised and making smart decisions. And, the first quarter, he was making smart decisions. He's keeping Ole Miss in this game and making the right calls. And obviously, part of that is Lane Kiffin making those calls, but also it's the quarterback being able to make those decisions. So if a guy was open, he didn't second guess it. He found that guy, hit him downfield, and kind of took things from there. He also didn't have to worry about his teammates at all because Kewan Lacey was really good. The wide receivers were making plays. So Ole Miss felt like they were in a pretty good position through those three quarters. And then the real hard part is when you go into the fourth quarter and you kind of disappear. That's probably the disappointing part of this. Georgia, I would say that Georgia took control of it more so than Ole Miss was struggling. It was clear that Georgia had a better energy, and that's how they essentially pull away in that fourth quarter. But again, even with 4:12 left in the third quarter, Ole Miss was hanging in there. Chambliss was making smart decisions. Deuce Alexander made that insane catch, one-handed catch on the sideline. That was really fun to watch, and it was really good to see a guy like Deshaun Stribling get involved. But at times, Georgia's defense was struggling. Both defenses were, but Georgia's defense did not look good. And then in the fourth quarter, they put the clamps down. So if you're Ole Miss, obviously, hey, we're close. We know that we can compete with the best of the best in this conference, and we can definitely still make a run at the college football playoff. Now, for the Georgia side, we learned that Gunnar Stockton is a good quarterback. And I think that there are some concerns about his natural abilities, and that's understandable. When you watch him play, it's clear that he's not the most naturally talented quarterback. However, we saw arguably his best game of his career. He was making smart decisions. He was distributing the football on time for the most part. Now, there were some parts where he had a play where he had two guys open. Could have picked the post, could have picked the wheel route, and he didn't. So there's definitely still some hesitancy in his game. There are some decisions that aren't the best for the team in terms of raising your ceiling. So that's one thing to keep an eye on for Georgia. That's one thing we learned, is that Gunnar Stockton can be a good quarterback for this team. And Mike Bobo deserves a lot of credit too. Giving his quarterback opportunities to make plays was the best thing for Stockton. And it wasn't like, hey, we're going to ask you to throw the ball deep a bunch of times. They were making some simple plays, and Stockton was making the throws. He was making the plays. He also added a good amount with his legs as well. So he finished 26-31 for 289 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also ran 10 times for 59 yards and another score. He was as good as Georgia needed him to be. Now, maybe he's found a new target in Lawson Lucky, who had 3 touchdowns today. That was a good emergence for this team. And you saw Georgia using multiple tight ends. The fact that Lucky was able to have those 3 touchdowns spoke to kind of how he was playing in this game. Now, you're going to need that because Colby Young is out for the foreseeable future That's going to be a tough loss because he was playing really well early on. Zachariah Branch made some plays. So we're reminded in a way that Georgia has the talent to be an extremely dangerous team and one of the best, if not the best, in college football. And I think the hard part with Georgia, if you're a Georgia fan, is that this team has not played its best football. This team still has things that they can do better. There are things that they can do at a high level. And we saw some of the stuff today because this offense was really good today. The defense, not so much. Now, the fourth quarter, both of them kind of figured it out. But if they can play how they played in the fourth quarter for an entire game, they are going to be unstoppable. That's probably the biggest thing you take away from this game is that Georgia has not played its best football yet. And the fact that they only have one loss speaks to how good this team could potentially be should they put that all together. But Georgia finds a way to win. You learn quite a bit about this team. You also see the potential of this team as well. And for Ole Miss, I think it's still promising. There's still positives to take away from it. Even though you didn't win, there are still things that are good. There are still things that you can build on, and you should feel really good about the position you're sitting in. You just have to find ways to finish. You had Georgia right where you wanted them for 3 quarters. You just didn't finish in the fourth quarter. And for Georgia, how do you find a way to take that fourth quarter and expand it to an entire game? Sometimes you're just going to have to win and find ways to win. Today was one of those examples. It got to the fourth quarter. You needed to find a way to win, and they did. So how do you do that for 4 quarters to make it so that you don't have to find a way to win? You know that you can, but how do you do it where you don't have to do that as much? I think we might have to start talking about SMU as an ACC contender, and not just because Miami lost this weekend. This is a team that had its struggles early in the season. However, there are some really good things about this team that they did against Clemson today. And there are a couple things that we learned about this team. And we'll start with the obvious one, which is getting revenge from the ACC championship. And granted, Clemson's going through its struggles. They didn't have Cade Klubnik, but still, this is still an SMU team that was able to win by 11 on the road. Rhett Lashley's team deserves a lot of credit for what they were able to do. And they showed that when they're playing at their best, they can play at a high level. They can be explosive. They can be disruptive on defense. Now, again, for Clemson, having Christopher Vizina as the starting quarterback obviously takes things down a notch. However, we got to see some of those skill position players step up in a big way, and that was really exciting. That was fun to watch. We saw the receivers step up in a big way. Now, the first half was largely SMU, and it felt like the Mustangs were going to, at one point, it felt like there was a breaking point where if SMU kept going, it was just going to be a blowout. Fortunately for Clemson, they had guys step up and make sure that it wasn't going to be the case. TJ Moore, phenomenal game. He had arguably his best game of his career. He scores his first touchdown in the second quarter, 32-yard touchdown from Vizina. And his second touchdown, a 62-yard sick one-handed catch in the second half in the third quarter. That was just unreal. And again, he was making play after play after play. And even later in that quarter, they had to settle for a field goal, but TJ Moore was getting open. He was making sure that they had opportunities to put points on the board. And he finished with 5 catches for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Tony Williams, 6 catches, 54 yards. Now you're looking at what can you do better. And truly, I think that the scary part about Clemson is that even if Clemson, this still holds true, if you had better play at quarterback, this would be one of the most terrifying offenses in college football. Now, you can make an argument, though, that the rushing attack, it leaves something to be desired. And that's very true. The fact that they're still using Adam Randall as their running back speaks to the concerns you have about that group. Now, I'm not in practice. I don't know what's going on there, but clearly Gideon Davidson is not living up to what expectations they have, whatever that may be. And the depth clearly is a question mark. That is a big time concern if you're Clemson. And for the long term, if you're looking at big picture, what does that mean for this team? That's going to be a big question. Now, on the SMU side of things, you saw them kind of deal with some adversity because having Kevin Jennings is going to afford you some luxuries that not a lot of teams have. And when you look at what happened in this game, Clemson was getting pressure on Kevin Jennings, and that did affect his game. That did affect the decisions he made. However, I really like the adjustments that this team made, the play calling, the quarterback play that allowed them to continue making plays and putting points on the board. You started off with a big Jordan Hudson touchdown, 70-yard corner route that he beats his man to the end zone. It's just the explosive plays that you've come to expect with SMU. And the one thing I kept noting watching this game is that Kevin Jennings' mobility is huge. And really in college football, you need a mobile quarterback if you want to have any sort of success. And having a mobile quarterback like Kevin Jennings gave SMU more opportunities to put points on the board and gave them opportunities to extend plays. And we'll see that later in the fourth quarter. You settled for field goals early, but the nice thing is that your defense was getting enough stops where even though you were only up 16-7 at halftime, you still felt like you were in a good position to win this football game. You felt like you were in control. And again, Kevin Jennings looked poised, looked in control, and he was taking shots, but it was still a team that felt like they were in the right place at the right time to make those kinds of plays, and they just needed to wait and continue chipping away until the explosive plays kind of came. And the third quarter, we kind of saw that. You see Chris Johnson Jr. break off a 30-yard run, and then later, Derek McFall gets a 35-yard touchdown run. And that's where you kind of felt, okay, this is where this is going to go in favor of SMU. Clemson obviously did not go away. TJ Moore made sure of that. But then SMU has a drive in the fourth quarter, early in the fourth quarter, where again, Jennings is getting pressured, he's getting hit, but they're still driving. And then he throws a great pass to Matthew Hibner, who makes a one-handed catch for a touchdown with 12:30 left in the fourth quarter. And it was the perfect example of this team not crumbling in the moment. When you look at the play, Clemson gets pressure on Kevin Jennings. He knows he has man coverage. He knows that his two of his guys are running a mesh route. Somebody's going to be open, and Hibner was that guy. He knew that he was going to be open. However, Hibner's coming from the right side. The pressure's also coming from the right side. Jennings backpedals essentially as much as he can, and then he gets a pass off at the last second. Hibner one-hands it and then scores. That was a good example of this team not crumbling under the pressure. And even when Clemson scores on Tristan Smith touchdown to pull within one score, this team just took the ensuing drive, drove it down the field, and scored a touchdown to make it 35-24. That is a proof that this team, that Rhett Lashley's team, is capable of handling the moment when it's big, when the spotlight is bright. Now, whether or not they are truly ACC contenders, that is still a question. However, they are now in a great place where you feel like you can consider them in that conversation. The defense had its moments where it was stifling. It was disruptive. And they had 8 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. So even though they gave up 24 points, which is not actually that bad, this game told me a lot about SMU that could potentially put them in that conversation. And I think that we have to have that conversation now. Kevin Jennings is having a year that not a lot of people are talking about. And this is a game that should keep that conversation going, or at least start it for people who aren't starting it already. This is going to be a fun team to watch, and the ACC should be aware of where they're at all times. Another fun game in the afternoon. We won't dive into this one a ton, but Boise State wins 56-31 to end UNLV's undefeated season. And this was a game that featured another round of optional defense for both sides. Now, the one thing with UNLV is we knew that their defense was suspect, and Boise State exposed that so much, so much. Early on, it looked like Maddox Madsen was going to have a career day. He looked confident. He was making good throws, and UNLV just couldn't cover any of Boise State's wide receivers. And then Boise State realized they can't stop the run either. And there were some glaringly obvious examples of that. Now, this is a Boise State team that averaged nearly 9 yards a carry, which is insane. Some of the plays, you look at the reverse by Cameron Bates in the first quarter. Very good play call, wide open for a 35-yard touchdown run. It was kind of back and forth through, and it was back and forth, I should say, through the first half. It was back and forth. And Anthony Calandria was doing everything he could to keep this team in the game. But he's one guy, and the defense didn't do them any favors. Dylan Riley had a 49-yard touchdown run where I don't even know if he got touched. It was just that wide open. Then in the second half, you had Sire Gaines, a 20-yard pass from Maddox Madsen. Didn't feel like there was much resistance on that drive. Chris Marshall had a 32-yard pass in the third quarter. You had a pick six. And again, there were a number of runs where the first UNLV defender didn't get to the running back or to the ball carrier until they were 20 yards downfield. That's how good Boise State was today, or you could say that's how bad UNLV was. Dylan Riley, 15 carries for 201 yards. He averaged 13.4 yards per carry and 1 touchdown. Madsen finished 14 of 23 for 253 yards and 4 touchdowns. Overall, the offense, very good for Boise State. The one concern you probably have if you're Boise State is the fact that Anthony Calandria gave you a ton of trouble. They had a ton of problems trying to slow him down, and they did get to him quite a bit, but he also exposed them in terms of how much they struggle with mobile quarterbacks. That's going to be something to keep an eye on. Should Boise State run into that once again? Calandria, I think, had a solid game despite what we saw. 18 of 30, 215 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. He also ran the ball 13 times for 87 yards and 1 touchdown. So it's clear that both teams' offenses have no problems. Both defenses have issues, but UNLV's issues are just far more than what Boise State has. James Madison keeps their playoff hopes alive with a 63-27 win over Old Dominion. Now, this was a game that did not start like a game that James Madison was going to dominate. In fact, it was actually the opposite. James Madison gets the opening kick and fumbles it, and Old Dominion picks it up for a touchdown to go up 7-0. And you felt like, okay, that's not a great way to start. Well, then the offense responds. So you've kind of settled in a little bit. James Madison's feeling pretty good. Alonzo Barnett has a 58-yard touchdown run to tie things up. After that, you feel like you have James Madison or Old Dominion in a good spot, and Colton Joseph throws a 98-yard touchdown pass to Trey Brown, who had a great first half and then really kind of fell off after that. And again, you're just going back and forth, trading touchdowns, trading scores back and forth. And at halftime, it's 28-27. Old Dominion misses an extra point. And the total yards at half, James Madison had 366. Old Dominion had 275. So you're thinking, okay, we're in for a long day. We're in for an absolute back and forth shootout, and it's just going to be one of those days. Well, James Madison's defense, I don't know what was told to them in the locker room, but they came out a completely different team. Gave up 0 points to Old Dominion and only allowed them 13 yards in the second half. 13 total yards. That is a team that woke up on one side of the ball, and their offense continued doing what it does. And Alonzo Barnett had a massive game. 17 of 25 for 295 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also ran 17 times for 153 yards and 4 scores. Alonzo Barnett is, and I've said this the entire year, Alonzo Barnett is going to give them the best chance to win. He is their best quarterback. He is their best player on offense, and he is going to be a reason why they win football games. And if they're going to make the playoff, which is looking better now with Louisville's upset win over Miami, he is going to be a big reason why they have a chance and why they could potentially be there. They just need to win out. That's the hard part. And you also have to hope the American continues losing because Memphis lost today. Now, USF is probably the front runner right now, but you need the American to implode. You need the Mountain West to implode, and you need to win out just to have a chance. Performances like this, first half, maybe not so much as good of a thing, but the second half showed a team that can put their foot down and make sure that the other team can't get anything going. So this was a fun game to watch for a James Madison perspective. And I think that there were things that can still be fixed. However, the second half, it was a very impressive performance from Bob Chesney's team. And Barnett went absolutely insane. He had 3 touchdowns in the second half alone. His wide receivers had no issues getting open against that Old Dominion defense, which was kind of surprising. Old Dominion's defense is much better than I think people realize, but today they got absolutely dominated. And for Old Dominion's offense, they had opportunities. There were a number of missed opportunities that they didn't get. I think Colton Joseph had his struggles at times, and that put them in a tough position, but there were definitely wide open receivers that were just missed. The middle of the field on play action, little pop pass kind of things, RPOs, there were opportunities that were missed for Old Dominion. But you're not going to apologize if you're James Madison. You know that, hey, this is a game that it was going either way, and we just got bounces, obviously, and we're not going to, we had our own issues, right? And both teams are going to have problems, but James Madison found a way to kind of negate some of those and to take matters into their own hands. So you feel like you're in a better place when you can do that, whereas Old Dominion wasn't able to do that. But there's a tale of 2 different halves. The first half was back and forth, an absolute battle. The second half was an absolute domination. Now, for James Madison, you have to look at winning out, and it's not going to be easy. The Sun Belt is full of talent, and Southern Miss is looking a lot better. What is that going to look like if those 2 teams play? This was a tough test for James Madison that they passed really, really with flying colors. So going forward, how do you continue playing at this level? Because when you get to the playoff, you're going to play teams that are just as explosive as Old Dominion. And Old Dominion showed other teams that you can put points up on this defense. How do you negate some of that going forward? How do you limit how many explosive plays you give up? And how do you take that second half and put it into the first half so that the team doesn't feel like they have a chance? Because if you can do that, you have a chance to pull off an upset at a larger scale once you get to that point. For now, you focus on the playoff, you focus on getting there, and then after that, you can figure out what you need to do to make some noise at that level. If anybody questioned the value of Sam Leavitt to Arizona State, I think those questions are gone. There are some things that obviously still need to be fixed for Arizona State, but a 26-22 win over Texas Tech was kind of a perfect example of what we love about college football. Texas Tech came into this game with an undefeated record. They were in the top 10, and Arizona State, even though they had a good record, there were some concerns about this team. And part of it was, is Sam Leavitt going to play? Is he healthy? And he did, and he showed exactly why this team is so much different with him running the show than with Jeff Sims. Unfortunately for Texas Tech, we learned a couple things about this team. Well, at least some people did. You learned that Baron Morton is a better quarterback than Will Hammond. And one of the things that I brought up a couple times now is every time Will Hammond gets into a game, it feels like he needs a few drives to get in rhythm. And it takes him a while to get comfortable. And Texas Tech could afford that because of the teams they were playing. But there was going to be a time and place where that was going to come back and bite them. Well, here's the game. This is the game that it came back to bite them. And it allowed Arizona State to build enough confidence, a team that went to the college football playoff last year, and it gave them the confidence to wake up and say, hey, we're in this game, and we're going to take control and make sure that this is our game to win, and Texas Tech just has to figure it out. Playing at home obviously helps. Having Sam Leavitt obviously helps. But the one thing I kept talking about, which Texas Tech fans seem to think that Will Hammond is just going to be just as good as Baron Morton. And obviously the health is part of that. There's a reason why Morton wasn't playing. But the concern I had was the amount of time it takes him to get into the game, to get in rhythm. That is going to hurt you eventually. And today it did. Now, did he have some good moments? Yes, absolutely. The fourth quarter put them back in the game, gave them a chance to win. So you do have to give him credit for that. However, I can't have my quarterback waiting until the second half or even the fourth quarter to wake up. That's not what good teams do. And it's clear that the rest of the team wasn't going to do its part. Now the defense, you can say the defense did what it could. It kept them in the game. It kept them, I mean, when you look at this game, it was 16-7 heading into the fourth quarter. It was a game, once again, that the defense just did what they could to keep them in it, and the offense just didn't have enough in the end. And you do what you can, but again, you can't have your quarterback take that long to get in the game. That's a big concern for this team. So how do you get him involved more? How do you get him in rhythm? That's going to be a big question, because the playoff is still an opportunity for Texas Tech. They can still very much get to where they want to go. It's just that now teams have a blueprint for how do you slow them down. Also, when you go to the Arizona State side of things, Sam Leavitt finished 28 of 47 for 319 yards and 1 touchdown. It's very clear that when he's in the offense, that the quarterback position is much better. You also notice that Jordan Tyson, he's good regardless of who's throwing the ball, but it's clear that he is more comfortable, he's more confident that he's going to get the ball in the right place at the right time. When you look at what this team did, so Texas Tech scores to go up late in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes and 5 seconds left. There's a fourth down where Leavitt rolls out to the right, looking for Tyson. He's not open. I mean, he probably could have thrown it, but Tyson reverses the field, runs upfield, and Leavitt finds him. It was like they were in sync the entire time. There was no doubt about, for either of them, where the ball was going and where the ball was going to be, where the receiver is going to be. And that play told me exactly why Sam Leavitt is so valuable to this team, which, if you didn't know that already, it was pretty, that was your revelation moment. But if you already knew that, that was just another example. And this Arizona State team is very dangerous. We might talk about some of the dangerous teams that we see in the conferences that could ruin some things for other teams. Arizona State is one of those teams. But Arizona State is also looking to get back into the playoff, and that is still very much a possibility. That is still very much an opportunity for Kenny Dillingham's squad. So how do they do that? That's going to be a big question. But they do have a top 10 win. And when you look at this weekend, you saw Texas Tech lose. You knew that either Georgia or Ole Miss was going to lose. Miami lost. You knew that there were opportunities for teams to go down. And we saw it. And honestly, college football is way more fun that way. When you have these upsets, when you have things that people aren't sure about, the chaos of college football, which everybody says they like, this is your chance to prove it, right? Do you actually enjoy what's going on in college football? These are fun games to watch. And the parity that we're seeing this year is incredible. That's something that's going to be really fun to watch the entire year. And the Big 12 is a great example of parity and uncertainty. So people are looking for the same few teams, which right now it feels like it's Ohio State and Indiana. You still have teams that could ruin that. Georgia is very capable of ruining things for Ohio State or Indiana. You just have to obviously wait till the playoff. I mean, Texas Tech and Arizona State, they're very capable of ruining things for other teams. This is going to be a fun rest of the year, and this was the perfect example for one game to kind of just show you exactly how fun this year could actually be. Other games that happened in the afternoon slate: Ohio State takes care of business 34-0 against the Wisconsin Badgers. Julian Sand, 393 yards and 4 touchdowns. Indiana, we just talked about both these teams, 38-13 against Michigan State. at one point in the pouring rain. It was kind of a struggle early on, but Indiana pulls away, obviously, and takes care of business there. A game that was very, very close was Texas A&M winning 45-42 against Arkansas. Taylor Green, once again, showing that he can be a one-man show, 341 total yards and 4 total touchdowns. Florida, what is Billy Napier's status going forward? Who knows by the time you watch this where he is at, but they do win 23-21, but fans still chanting, "Fire Billy," after the game. Jaden Baugh, you have to talk about him, 23 carries, 150 yards, and 1 touchdown. Going to the group of 5 here real quick, Air Force with a 24-21 win over Wyoming. Liam Zararka, a great performance for him, 26 carries, 141 yards, and 1 touchdown. Speaking of great performances by relatively unknown quarterbacks, Coastal Carolina, a 45-37 win over App State. Samari Collier, 192 total yards and 3 total touchdowns. Sticking in the group of 5, North Texas absolutely takes it to UTSA, 55-17. Drew Mestemaker, 22-35, 277 yards and 4 touchdowns, gets back on track. Memphis gets stunned. Memphis was, for a lot of people, the front runner for the group of 5 to get in the college football playoff. They go down 31-24 against UAB, who is playing their first game without their head coach. Trent Dilfer got fired. Ryder Burton, 20 of 27, 251 yards and 3 touchdowns. Alabama beats Tennessee 37-20, and not really a surprise there. There are some good things to talk about with Tennessee, but for Alabama, you knew things were going to get off to a good start when you saw the wide receivers, all of them, making some big plays. The first touchdown by Isaiah Horton was an absolute nasty whip route that goes for a touchdown. Again, Ty Simpson is absolutely locked in right now, making really accurate throws, making big plays for this team. Ryan Williams making some big catches as well. We saw a number of passes today that were kind of outside of his catch radius, if you will, or outside of his frame for sure, and he came down and he snatched them. There were some questions about Ryan Williams as a pass catcher with his drops recently, but he had a really nice game. I thought that he looked good, looked very comfortable making these catches too. It looked like it was something he's not overthinking. So that was really nice to see as well. Now, Tennessee did battle back in the second quarter. You had a really good stretch for Tennessee where you felt like, okay, this is going to be a team that's going to keep it close. Braylon Staley made a couple of nice catches to tie things up. The drive where everything kind of slipped out of their hands was they're in their own end zone. A penalty pushes them back, and Joey Aguilar is almost going to get sacked. He trips a little bit and tries to throw it away. Doesn't go at anybody. Considered a safety. Then Alabama takes the next play there, scores a touchdown, and then right before the half, Tennessee's driving. They have the ball near the goal line and they run play action, and it was one of those where you knew that Tennessee had to throw. Alabama knew that Tennessee had to throw. They weren't going to run the ball. And then Aguilar, he had a guy technically open, but it's probably one of those he probably should have thrown away. He has a guy in the flat. He just throws it late and inside, and you can't throw it inside behind your receiver. Xavier Brown picks it off, goes 98 yards the other way, and all of a sudden, a game that was close, or you could have put up a field goal to potentially stick in this game, is all of a sudden 23-7 at halftime. Now, give credit to Tennessee. They still fought back. And Deshaun Bishop was a big reason why. And Bishop really has been having a good little stretch here, having a good season. 14 carries for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns in this one. He had a 44-yard touchdown run to start the second half. He also had a touchdown to start the fourth quarter as well. So he was a big reason why they were in this game. It's just that Alabama appears to have a stable wide receivers that are going to be a problem because they're actually playing how they should be. And that's terrifying for everybody. And this stretch that Alabama just had, they're clearly okay with how difficult it is. They have no problems with that. And again, we talked about how I'm still not sure how they lost to Florida State. Don't really know, but that team is completely gone. This is a very dangerous Alabama team. For Tennessee, obviously you're disappointed. It is 37-20. You felt like, okay, well, this wasn't great. However, we still had some good things. Deshaun Bishop is a really good player for them. These wide receivers can make plays. You just made a couple of mistakes that kind of switched everything into Alabama's favor. The safety, the pick six, those are huge things that kind of flipped the momentum, and Alabama just basically took over from there. Now, I don't know what Notre Dame's chances to make the playoff are going to actually be when it's all said and done, but I do know that Jeremiah Love is worth the price of admission, worth watching. And a 34-24 win against USC had some things that are concerning, but also some really good things as well. Now, the one thing we talked about coming into this game was how is USC going to expose what Miami kind of did to Notre Dame, which is attacking the slot. We thought that Mekhi Lemon could potentially be a good threat in the slot, and I thought that Notre Dame did a great job of limiting him pretty much through the first quarter. We didn't hear Mekhi Lemon's name called at all, and then the second quarter they get him more involved, and it was a fun game overall. It was full of some really good things. There was also a stretch where it was extremely sloppy, but I think the one thing we learned about USC is that and really, I don't think we actually learned this, but we saw the magnitude of it. Stopping the run is not their forte. You look at Notre Dame, 44 carries, 306 yards. They average 7 yards per carry, which is crazy. They average 6.3 yards per play for this entire game. Now, that being said, I do think that Notre Dame should have won this game by more. They were not playing as well as they should have. They were not playing as disciplined as they should have. And CJ Carr made some freshman mistakes. That's going to hurt you. And if you want to play well in the playoff, you can't have those. And honestly, they're mistakes that I don't really understand why he was even making them. And probably it's just trying to do too much, but there are times where you just got to eat it, but it's a learning opportunity. Now for USC, I don't know what the answer is, because there's a reason why you made a change to get D'Angelo in as your coordinator, and the defense is just obviously having its issues. And whatever that actually is, I don't really know. Now, same thing can be said for this USC team. Mistakes were made that you're just kind of scratching your head. Jaden Maeva made a number of throws that you were questioning, why are we doing that? What's the point? And just terrible decisions. The weather played a factor as well. You had a trick play where Mekhi Lemon fumbles it because he's trying to throw it as you get tackled, fumbles the ball. And again, there were just any opportunity that USC had to, in the second half at least, to keep momentum, Notre Dame had an answer to it or a response. And had, you look at the Jacoby Lane 59-yard touchdown in the third quarter, you feel like it's a great chance for USC to capture that momentum. And then Jadarian Price takes the ensuing kickoff back for a touchdown. And it's just like, what are we going to do? Now, you did benefit from a number of other mistakes. Notre Dame misses that PAT. They missed a couple of field goals, I believe. There were definitely mistakes by both sides. And some of them you can blame on the weather, but other things were just, these are two teams that have a lot to fix. I think that's one thing that we learned, is that there are things that need to be sorted out on both sides. So how do you get that done? If you're Notre Dame, you feel better that you won, but you also know that there are things that could be improved. Now, the passing attack wasn't exactly explosive for Notre Dame, so you'd like to see them kind of figure that out as well. But I do think you have to give Mike Denbrock a lot of credit for getting this team in position to win this game, and also, plain and simple, just get the ball to your playmakers. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, phenomenal performance for those two. So you have to give him credit for understanding that, hey, I'm just going to get the ball to my best playmakers and it's going to work, because USC had zero answer for that. But a big win, 34-24. It's the last tough test on Notre Dame's schedule for the rest of the regular season. And now we kind of play that game of, are they going to make it into the playoff with the resume that they have? Utah and BYU was about as entertaining as you would have expected. The uniforms were phenomenal. Utah was wearing all red, BYU was wearing all blue, and it was an energetic game to start that did not feature any points in the first quarter. Defenses were getting after the offenses, and it was sloppy at times, but also it was just good energy. The atmosphere was great in the stadium. The defenses were playing at a high level, and then the offenses finally settled down. BYU gets on the board first. Bear Bachmeier had a couple of nice throws to Chase Roberts. He has a nice throw with Chase Roberts running over the middle for 17 yards. And then the next play, I believe is the next play. Yeah. And he throws an absolute dart to Roberts, whose defender's not looking, catches right over his head, touchdown. Utah then responds. Lander Barton has a big 17-yard catch on 2nd and 13, which sets up a Ryan Davis touchdown. And then BYU adds a field goal heading into half to go 10-7. Third quarter, just like the first, no points, and the defenses are playing really well. And then the point where things kind of change is with over 12 minutes left ish in the fourth quarter, Lander Barton gets ejected for targeting. And that's where BYU kind of took control. They scored 2 touchdowns there, and they kind of just, that's what they needed. And Utah adds a late touchdown in the game and doesn't get the onside kick. And the game is over. BYU kind of hangs on. So that's a big win for BYU for a couple of reasons. We had talked about BYU and how their undefeated record was kind of questionable. That clearly is not the case. This is clearly a team that knows what it's doing and knows how to win big games. And you have to give Kalani Sitake a ton of credit for what his team has done. You also beat a rival in an ugly game at times, and you had a freshman quarterback that stepped up in a big way and delivered on the biggest stage. Now, was it his best performance? No, he finished 13 of 22 for 166 yards and 1 touchdown. He also ran 11 times for 64 yards and another score. LJ Martin was kind of the star of the offense, 26 carries, 122 yards, averaged 4.7 yards per carry. So this was about as expected. You kind of knew this was going to be a tough battle, a tough rivalry game, and you found a way to win. So for BYU, you feel pretty good. For Utah, this is very disappointing. You thought that maybe you were going to make a run at the Big 12 title. I feel like that's kind of out of the question right now unless some things happen. Some teams kind of fold ahead of you. BYU, though, feels really good about where they're at, and you found a way to beat your rival, which is always great, but you keep your undefeated season alive, and also now you suddenly sit atop of the Big 12 with Cincinnati, which is not something that anybody predicted coming into this year. Some final games that we'll talk about here. Texas has to go to overtime to beat Kentucky 16-13. If you're Kentucky, you have to feel absolutely frustrated because you had plenty of opportunities to win this game, and times you dominated and you still lost in overtime. Arch Manning was horrendous, 12 of 27, 132 yards. Don't know what to do there. That's just an ugly situation. And right when you think that they're going to get better, something like this happens. Penn State loses to Iowa. The free fall continues, though you knew that was potentially going to happen. Iowa wins 25-24. Mark Gronowski, 198 total yards and 3 scores. UCLA continues its hot streak with a 20-17 win over Maryland at home. It was not pretty for either side, but UCLA does come away with the win. Hawaii surprises people by becoming bowl eligible, improving to 6-2. They win 31-19 on the road against Colorado State. Mike Alejado is on an absolute hot streak right now. 26 of 38 for 301 yards and 3 touchdowns. If you're Colorado State, I think you have to feel pretty disappointed about this result. I think there are some big time questions about if this is working with Jay Norvell, but for now, you just have to figure out how do we get better for the next opportunity. For Hawaii, Timmy Chang deserves a lot of credit. This was a team that I thought could be a surprise in the Mountain West, and so far they are showing to be exactly that. USF pulls away in the second half from FAU to win 48-13. It was kind of an ugly game. Byron Brown, though, 367 total yards, 4 touchdowns. Pitt beats Syracuse 30-13, and Mason Heinschel once again clearly is the answer at quarterback. Not his greatest performance, but still a game that was really back and forth and an absolute grinded out kind of win. Special teams played a big role for Pitt as well, and that was the difference to help them improve to 5-2. Missouri goes into Auburn and comes away with a 23-17 win in overtime. A very interesting game, a very interesting result. We'll see what that has in terms of effects on the Auburn Tigers. If you're Eli Drinkwitz, you feel really confident and really excited about what you just saw. You found a way to just grind out a win, and you held tough. You had some mistakes, but you found a way to win in overtime, and you improved to 6-1. If you're Auburn, who knows what's going to happen after this? 3-4 is not where this team expected to be. Once again, Jackson Arnold continues to have some issues, and it's just not a great experience if you're an Auburn fan. Cincinnati improves to 6-1, 48-17 win over Oklahoma State. And the first half looked like it was going to be a little bit back and forth, but the Cowboys do not have the firepower that the Bearcats possess, and Cincinnati's offense kind of flexed its muscle on the way to this 48-17 win. Brendan Sorsby, 20 of 29 for 270 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's it for week 8. Week 8 was another great week. I think we're getting really spoiled this year with a lot of entertaining weeks. We've had the afternoon slates felt like they've been really good, but let me know what was your most surprising result. What did you enjoy the most? Comment that below. As always, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.